Welcome back to Following Know It on a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 170, and we are discussing the entirety of part 5 of The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. I almost said, I don't know what I almost said. I almost said, I don't remember. Paul, how are
Words
you?
of Radiance.
Yeah, I
I
could have
think
been
this-
Words of
I
Radiance.
I still like every time I mention Words of Radiance or Rhythm of War, I say whatever the other book is and not the correct title. Anyways, I'm doing great, doing fantastic. I live in Texas. Weather's finally starting to cool off, which is a miracle, and I just love that. And I'm excited to talk
80
about this
today or something for you?
Yes, actually. Well, so this week, this is a bad time for me to say it. Last week was really cool. Like it was like high of like
Sure.
68 degrees, It was pretty cold for this time of year in Texas. But this week it got hot again and it's like high of like 85. And I missed the temperatures. Anyways, excited to talk about part 5. We're really in the thick of the book. Really really there near the end now. And so I'm excited to talk.
Eliot?
I was going to say something similar to what you just said there, Paul. I think we've gotten to obviously the meat of it. This has got to be the part that everyone talks about or is referencing when they say, "Oh yeah, Well of Ascension. I love that one," because I was kind of waiting for it coming into part 5. Here was like, really, everybody loves this book because I'm not feeling it. But clearly, this was the wait. This is what we were waiting for. Although there is a whole nother part left, so maybe there's more shocking stuff to come. But this was pretty exciting.
Well, another part, and we have still yet to see any ascending wells, so we can
That's true.
maybe wait to see that next week. But this week, we have, oh my goodness, we have the Siege of Luthadel, what's been set up since the first sentence of this book. Finally, a battle broke out. The battle broke out. And several character deaths that we'll talk about. We have a diversion of a plot that we'll talk about. More character deaths. We'll get Eliot to summarize the whole thing for those of you who haven't read The Well of Ascension. But let's roll intro, and then we'll talk about chapters 49 through 55, entirety of part 5 of The Well of Ascension. All right, Eliot. How fast do you think you can do justice of a summary? We lost him. Oh, hello.
That was pretty fast. Yeah, that was pretty quick.
We didn't hear you, Eliot.
Yeah.
I
can't hear
really lagged out there for a second. I'm back though. Summary. Yeah, a lot of big things happen. Tons of stuff to talk about. So I'm not going to try and get into details at all. This will be the high level of a Sanderlanche. Let's see, part 4 set us up with at the end Sazed and crew deciding to send Vin and Elend away for their own safety, just to get them out of the city so that they'll survive, because I think everybody's going to die. So Vin and Elend are headed out. Spook is going with them, and then Alrianne tags along right at the last second. Tindwyl does not go with them. She was originally going to, I think, at one point, and ended up not. So they take off. Off they go, headed to Terrace to go find the Well of Ascension. We then get a bunch of just discussions between characters as they're kind of bracing for the siege to happen. Let's see. The siege does surely happen, and the Colossus attack, and things get pretty gruesome. They hold the gates. We get an epic scene with Sazed holding the gate against the Colossus attack, and then Vin arrives on the scene to save the day because on their journey they discover that they've been lied to. Spook actually kind of spills the beans at one point or gives them the truth, and so Vin journeys back as fast as she can and saves the day. Saves Sazed's life there. They battle the Koloss. Vin discovers that she can do the whole mind control thing on the Koloss, the same thing that she figured out she could do to Akandra. So that's the turning point of, Vin's powerful, but she can't fight an entire army of Koloss. However, she can mind control an entire army of Koloss. So she takes control of all the Koloss. They turn them around and face them out against Straff, go charging out of the city and pretty much lay the smackdown on Straff and his army. Set joins their side. Maybe some gray area there on what side Set is really on, or what role Alrian has had to play in all of it. But Set joins in with the heroes, and it ends with Vin basically forcing everybody to swear loyalty back to Elend at the end of the day. So that's where we wrap up at the end of part 5.
And how much of that did you predict?
Not much.
Okay.
There were quite a few surprises in there.
Paul, how much of that did you remember?
I remembered the fight. I definitely remembered a lot of the things with Sazed pretty vividly, and I remembered the stuff with Elend. I did not remember who does and does not make it out alive.
Me neither.
That was some of the things that I had forgotten, actually.
I remembered that Tyndall dies. I did not remember that Doxson dies. Or is it Breeze? I always mix them up. Doxson dies. Doxson dies. I did not remember that Doxson dies. So when that scene happened, I was like, oh, forgot about that. But something I did vividly remember is the scene where Vin horseshoes her way back to Luthadel. I think there's something like fairly iconic about Vin jumping through the air with horseshoes, and I don't even know what verb to put on that. Vaulting? Swinging? I don't know how to describe that.
That's a good point.
I like vaulting, but it's even more complicated than that, though. I
Right.
read that scene and my mind was just kind of blown because she's doing the jumping on the horseshoes, similar to how she does the whole Mistborn jumping thing anyway. It's almost like an inverse Spider-Man sort of thing. And but the complicated part here is she has to throw the horseshoes down as she goes and pull them up from behind her as she goes. And so it's like vaulting, but then it's also like juggling at the same time. She's got to throw and pull and catch and throw and pull while doing the whole steel push jump thing and not falling off of her like exactly where she's need to be, or she's going to come crashing to the ground. That would require an insane amount of focus to keep that going for miles and miles. Just
Also,
insane.
Also with the speed that she's doing it, I feel like she needs some pretty flat ground. I feel like elevation would really mess you up pretty quickly, or even just like divots in the floor would cause you to throw yourself a weird way.
Yeah, she talks about how like you can only push on the one that's on the ground for so long, because if it gets too much of an angle, then the horseshoe will slip,
Right.
and you basically fall. And so, like, yeah, if you couldn't like do it uphill, really, could you? Like, 'cause if you're going uphill, I feel like that angle is way harder to make work. You
Right.
know?
And trees are going to mess you up if your horseshoe gets stuck in a tree. Like,
Mhm.
there's a lot of variables going on here.
Should we talk about Vin first then? All the way through? Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Vin and Elend, at the very beginning of chapter 49, pack up and break through Straff's blockade. They on a full gallop. Is it just the four of them? Allrian, Spook, Vin, and Elend?
I think so.
Okay. So they make it through, and they they make a point of being seen doing it. Like they don't go out of the way to kill a bunch of people, but they're also not like sneaking out. They burst through the line so that Straff will see Vin leave. Um, and at this point, Straff still thinks Zane is alive, and so Straff attributes it to Zane that he successfully got her to leave. I don't know how he did it, but that's cool. Now we can let the Kolos kill the city, and then I'm gonna back up, and then I'll save the city. So Vin and Ellen leave, and they actually have their first like real encounter with the mist ghost. I always want to call it a mist wraith, but it's specifically not a mist wraith. Mist specter. And Ellen might have died to it. What did you guys think of that quick scene that the ghost like actually attacks Ellen the way it does in the logbook with our ancient characters?
I'm struggling to figure out that mist being thing. Like, what's its motive?
Right.
Is it something that has like thought? Does it have a motive, or is it truly the deepness? And maybe even it's not even thinking. It's just doing. It just is. It's there. It's a mist. Person must kill person. I don't know because I'm not quite sure what to think about it. And I think everyone else thinks that Vin's crazy for seeing it. Like even Ellen, he doesn't even see it, right? It's just Vin.
Right. Are you leaning one way or the other on it for prediction? Is it a force of nature and it's reacting, or is it like a person and has motives?
I'm gonna say this carefully for spoiler reasons. Maybe we could touch it again at the end. I think I think it is coming awake. That's
Okay.
my guess.
Okay.
I think it is in sort of a semi-sentient state right now, where maybe it is acting more instinctively and not so much specifically based on a motive, but this process that it's been freed from its limitations and it's going from mist to being like it's awakening, it's coming into thought, it's coming into actions on purpose, that sort of thing. So maybe it's kind of in this state of destroy is its mantra, but as it becomes more and more real, maybe it's going to get into the realm of wait, why am I doing this? Who do I answer to? Who am I? That sort of thing. I think that's the direction we're going in.
Okay.
I could agree with that. It doesn't. It feels conscious to me. It doesn't feel just like wherever the wind blows, since it's interacting with like Ellen, I guess. Yeah.
It
It
it did feel very dangerous in this scene for maybe the first time. It's one of those things where it's always over Vin's shoulder. It's always there. Vin doesn't seem too worried about it. I've never been too worried about it. And then here in this moment where Vin opens the tent flap and there it is standing over Ellen about to kill him, like I very much felt in that moment it could kill him right there if it wanted to. I don't feel like we felt that kind of imminent danger from it before. So that was different.
do you do you think the tent had anything to do with it because they're out of like buildings where the mist doesn't usually go? Does that give it more power, or is it just taking its opportunity that Ben was distracted by something?
I mean, I'm kind of thinking all the above. Back to the whole I think it's gaining power. I think it's
Okay.
gaining abilities, it's building. So it's starting to enter places where it hasn't been able to enter before. I mean, think back to the whole Zane scene where that room inside fills up with mist. That was a moment where the mist had incredible power, way more than it normally does. And this was, I think, another moment where it's building in power. It has access to Ellen like it hasn't normally had before, and Vin was distracted, and so it's taking advantage of that moment to maybe kill Elend or maybe just try and get Vin's attention. I'm also kind of maybe on that fence of maybe it's not quite so evil necessarily and more of it wants Vin's attention and that's how it's trying to get it.
Sounds good. After that quick scene, Vin. Oh, you summarized this as well. Spook spills the beans that Sazed intentionally sends away Vin and Elend, and Vin is very frustrated at this, and begins to make her way back. But is that before the Jasty scene or after? Has Vin left?
Vin is there for the Jasty scene.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure.
so
I'm pretty sure.
let's talk about that then. Jastes has lost control of his Koloss army and flees. And is he intentionally following Vin and Elend? I think, with his bodyguards of like, I don't know, 12 or 15 or however many he has left. And then Elend makes the decision to execute Jastes on behalf of like Luthadel. He's saying his quote is, "I forgive you, but my people cannot." And he beheads him right there on the spot. I didn't remember this at all. I thought that was awesome. But
I will say I did remember this. I did remember this scene, but what was different for me on a reread was I didn't really remember who Jasty was.
mm-hmm.
Like, whenever we started and read the first book again, then I was like, Jasty's like, okay, I want to hear more. And there's nothing like crazy, but you just see that him and Elend were like good friends. You know, like they were pretty good friends and stuff. Like, you know, and and it didn't play out too well for him. But yeah, this was a pretty brutal one, and this was like, I feel like Elend has kind of taken this like honorable figure, which is still pretty true. Like, this was a time that, you know, whether it was honorable or not, was still like ruthless, you know. And so yeah, it was honestly almost a little bit of a shock that Elend would do that.
This feels like a turning point in Ellen's character. This was this was a major scene, and it definitely surprised me quite a bit. In that, not necessarily in a disapproving way. I'm not sure that I like the action that Ellen does here, but the Ellen that we knew before this was not even like capable of this action.
Yeah.
This is new. Ellen has reached a new level of confidence and authority that I don't think we've seen from him. I mean, think back to book one, the like awkward kid in the corner who wants to read a book instead of talking to people. And here he is saying, I take the justice of my own people into my own hands and I execute you. And then by his own hand kills him on the spot. Like that's wow. What a journey for a character. That is so far from where we first met Ellen.
In front of his own guards too. He doesn't even confront the guards until after he does it. He doesn't know how they'll react. And they do like grab their swords and begin to rush him, and then he just turns around and says, "Am I wrong?" And then they all look at each other and say,
Yeah.
"Nope, you are not."
Uh-huh.
And
Which is really funny. I feel like that's a good like almost nod to the reader. If we were kind of like on the same page, you know. But I think that's just really funny. Is exactly like you were saying. He's basically like, "Am I wrong?" They're like,
and I gotta say, a part of me did cheer in this moment because I do not disagree with Ellen. That is the correct verdict for what Jassy has done. And it's especially necessary or feels like it is because Jassy doesn't even realize what he's done. He's like, "Oh yeah, I lost control of the army, so I just left them. That's fine, right? It's not my fault. They're just Koloss." And it's just like, oh my gosh, man. The massacre of a civilization of people is going to be on your hands because you didn't think your entire plan through, and at the end of it, you're just like, "Oh well, screw it. The world's fine. I don't care." And like directly contributed. You caused the brutal murder of women and children, and that's not okay. I do want to say though, I do want to say, because this has been such a political intrigue, political science heavy book, there are big problems with a political figure taking the entire justice system into their own hands.
Hmm.
Like in this moment, I'm cheering for Ellen. I'm like, man, that's great. Justice needs to be taken down. But circumventing the entire justice system, courts, decisions, what is it? I'm blanking on the term when you're like on trial, jury of your peers, all that kind of thing. And basically taking all of that into your hand, judge, jury, executioner, I am all those. You need to die. I'm killing you here on the spot. In this moment, is it fine? Yeah, it's probably fine. You cannot set that as your legal precedent for your nation. That is
Well,
huge problems.
specifically for Ellen as well, we spent the whole book establishing him as the ideal is first, and do if I suffer, if my position suffers because of the ideal that I've set forward, so be it. And now he's very much taking the other stance of I'm going to do what's right, even if the ideals I set forward don't allow me to. And he's been having people in his ear the whole book saying, you need to take control of the city by force if necessary. And Ellen's the whole book says, no, I'm not willing to do that. And this is him doing that, I guess.
Again, turning point for Ellen's character, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean,
And
if Vin had done it for him, I don't think we'd be talking about this for near as long. But the fact that Ellen does it is important.
yes, I agree. And I also want to come back to this in our Stormlight spoiler section because the instant it happened, it immediately brought me back to another scene in Stormlight, which I won't say anything else because it'll get very spoilery real fast. But let's talk about this again at the end of the episode.
Sounds good. Horseshoes
Can I go
back
back
to
real quick?
Yeah, go.
There's a couple more things I want to talk about with Vin and Elend before we go back to Luthadel.
Okay.
And the first one is I was feeling extremely awkward once our crew set out because think about this. Elend and Vin head out of the city. Who do they have with them? Spook, Alrianne, party of 4.
And they're supposed to have Tyndall.
Alrianne, they're supposed to have Tyndall.
So,
Tyndall doesn't come. Tyndall stays. Alrianne bails as soon as they get out of the city. Alrianne's gone. Now you have newly married, 24 hours, Vin and Elend on a long journey through the countryside with Spook. I cannot imagine a more awkward third wheel situation than what we have right here. This is as bad as it gets. Newlyweds and the guy that used to have a crush on her. Just
yeah.
traveling together through the countryside. It's fine.
Should I
Yeah,
add to this as well? He's a tin eye,
sure.
so he
Yeah,
can he can see and hear
yeah,
whatever he wants.
yep. And they're living in tents. They're just staying in tents.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm glad
yeah.
somebody acknowledges it because I also feel that way when I read this scene. I'm like, why did we have to write it this way?
So bad. So bad. Anyway, just wanted to acknowledge that. Extremely awkward. Last thing I want to talk about Vin real quick. Real quick, before we go back to Luthadel, because that's where kind of the main action is. In chapter 51. Chapter 51. This is just before Jastes shows up, but just after Vin saves Ellen from the mist being. Vin has a talk with Spook, and Spook talks to her about this confidence that he sees in her. He tells her about how confident she is. I think referencing back kind of that whole, wow, you're not the person I originally met. This is crazy. And Vin kind of processes that internally for a couple of pages. And she realizes two things have happened to her. One, she's married Ellen, and that has like given her this view of worth of herself that she hasn't had before. And then also, she reflects on the fact that she has accepted that she is the hero of ages.
Mm, yeah.
But back to that whole titles of the books seem like they might be backwards. She 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 mental like in her own mind is thinking through like, man, I've really embraced this. I might be the hero of ages, and she's thinking about the confidence that has kind of built up in her. And I paused there because that was so close. It might be. It might be. I think it's slightly short of exactly what I was asking for Vin's storyline. I've been talking about this about Vin all throughout the Mistborn book so far. When we met Vin for the first time, her her sense of self-worth is like zero. She has no confidence in herself, no belief that she in and of herself has value. This is that moment where I think that changes for her. She now sees herself as having worth, and it's kind of tied to Ellen. It's tied to, wow, he sees value in me. Maybe I am worth something. And then there's the whole hero of ages thing. It's like, man, what if I am the hero of ages? What if I can do this? And the scene itself didn't quite flesh it out to that level of detail, which is why I said I'm not 100% sure this is all the way to where I want it to be. I'm not sure that Vin has realized necessarily that she has that worth, but she's at least starting to think that way.
Right.
She's starting to think that way. We've come a long way, which is exactly what I was hoping to see with Vin.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good point. And I think that's like probably one of my favorite aspects of this book is book book one of this series was just like a good, well-rounded, like little story, almost on its own, within the bigger story here. This book gets criticized for kind of having middle book syndrome, which it has a little bit of, but it is honestly a lot of almost stepping back and gearing up for the forward for the future of like setting all of our characters up, really getting us to have this like I feel like relationship with Van and Ellen and Sazed and Tendwell and the crew. You know, like we learn about the crew in the first book, but it's really mostly like Van and Kelsier and stuff. You know, and maybe not as much character development, but like story progression. You know, but aside from that, I actually have a question for you, Eliot. Kind of like a prediction, and of so she has kind of come into this like believing she's the hero of ages. Says it has kind of mixed feelings on the whole scenario. There's like a bit of stuff. Um, I think he's kind of resigned to thinking no, but not really sure. But I'm curious to know what you think. Do you think, you know, like with the next book, are we going to have the hero of ages? Who is it going to be? What are they going to do? Like this is a really bold, out of the blue prediction to kind of make. You know, that's a big one to just drop. Like we
But,
haven't even finished this book, but
but
I just want to know now
before you
before
answer
we
this,
go.
Elliot,
Yeah.
I think it's really funny that you're asking him this now and not 50 pages in the future when he might have quite a bit more information about what this question is.
Yes,
It's
that's exactly what I'm doing. Yes,
yes.
100%.
I'm just
I want to know the like no context predictions. The no context like simply just like guessing what might happen going forward.
I got you. I'm prepared for this question. I think I think we're headed for a Sanderson twist. I think we're headed for a you've got a classic trope like the chosen one, right? That's a thing all across like fantasy. It's you've got the prodigy or the gifted one or the chosen one, that they are meant to fulfill the quest. My prediction. Vin could very well be the hero of ages. Very well. I think the twist is going to be there isn't one single hero of ages, and that you read all the historical texts and prophecies and things like that. They're all talking about this one hero of ages, and I think everyone's misreading it. I think that's going to be maybe a storyline in book 3, is the heroes having to accept, like, oh, maybe Vin is not the hero of ages, but that's okay because anybody who's willing to step up, commit, has the gifts, albeit like maybe not everybody, not anybody can be the hero of ages, but anybody who has the gifts and is willing to step up and sacrifice themselves or wield the power or take on the role, take on the responsibility, they can be the hero of ages. And so I think there's gonna be a twist. I think that it's a trick question. There is not one single hero of ages. There are potentially many.
And then to kind of help you with that too is they specify this whole like it's not like I don't remember exactly the quote of what Sazed says, but it's like um they kind of like generally view the old text as like saying he referring to the hero of ages, but they don't actually
Yeah.
know. It's some kind of like gender neutral like text. So it could be a man, could be a woman, I would argue could even be a group of people, like you're saying. You know, it could be like a they plural, you know? Like so yeah. I like it. And I was way too curious. I wanted to ask because that's where my brain even is now, but especially the first time is like I I was trying not to focus on it too much because I knew that was for the next. I knew the next book was called The Hero of Ages, but I wanted to figure it out now. Also, so sorry. I need to let my dog out before she keeps barking.
Okay.
So sorry.
All right, lets me mute myself on Steam so I don't get a blip.
Okay.
Just to add maybe a little evidence to our thought train here, the last sentence of part 5 is what you're talking about there, Paul. It says, "We had the wrong gender all along." Back to that whole the pronouns and the hero of the stories, they all translated as he, but it could also be translated as she. I think they're gonna like pendulum swing to the other side and go, "Oh, it's a she, not a he. It's all Vin." Maybe
Mhm.
missing the whole point of, hang on a second, it can be either.
And I think this conversation could quickly swing to Sazed, so maybe we'll transfer over to him here in a second. But um, as Vin is coming back to save the city, which we're going to skip forward a little bit here, Sazed is in the middle of his epic defend the people heroics in front of not Tin Gate, because that's where Tyndall is. I don't remember which gate he's on. Anyway, he's single-handedly holding the gate with his feruchemy, and like 200 yards behind him, outside of the square, are all the ska. And at one point in the battle, he turns to them and says, "What are you doing? Go hide in a keep." And do you guys remember what the ska say?
I remember the line exactly.
The One of the skas says, "Oh, the heir to the survivor will come and save us." They're completely confident that their goddess figure in Vin will come and save the day. And Sazed is by no means as confident as they are. In fact, he's hoping that she won't, and then she does. So whether Vin realizes or not, she is fulfilling prophecies both of the church and old prophecies of the hero of ages just by acting on what she feels. So what is it, the last like 2 pages of the part? Sazed is reciting prophecies about the hero of ages as Vin is fulfilling them in front of him. So by the end of the part, Sazed is convinced that Vin is the hero of ages. But I don't. But there might be an asterisk there. Asterisk.
I do want to. I want to point out it's either irony or really masterful writing in this Sazed scene. In that Sazed has talked about recently, like a couple chapters before this, about how faith in a religion is important. And people challenge him like, well, hold on a second, they can't all be right. So some people are wrong, right? And Sazed has taken the argument of, well, no, the faith itself has some value. And when they press him, Sazed's like, yeah, I believe in all the religions. I have faith in all of them. I'm a man of faith. This moment here where Sazed is defending the gate and the Church of the Survivor are standing there waiting for Vin to come save them. Like that is faith.
Yeah.
That is true faith right there. They are willing to stand there meters away from where the Koloss are just destroying people because they believe that Vin is going to show up to save them. And to contrast that with Sazed, who says he believes in all of it, but doesn't really live that faith
Yeah.
in any of those religions that he talks about, is a huge compare and contrast moment of Sazed is the religious one, and this Church of the Survivor, Scott, they're the ones like putting everything, they're all in on this faith they haven't been. It was a stark contrast.
Yeah. I'm really glad you pointed that out because Sazed is the religion guy, and claims he believes in them all, or at least that's one of his last words to Tyndwyl, is I believe they all have value at least. And then he, I think it's right after the battle and before they go and fight Straff, that he has some serious questions that he asks himself after he finds Tyndwyl, because he realize, or he has and rightfully so, a mourning period there of why does any of this matter? Why are we here if Tyndwyl's gonna die?
And let me read it because it's a really powerful moment for me. I, Sazed felt like the focus of this part for me.
Mm,
Actually, there's a big Ellen moment. There's some big Vin moments, and I think it was the Sazed moments that felt the most powerful for me. Let me read it. And this is end of chapter 54. This is Sazed has just discovered Tyndwyl's dead body. What was the point? None of Sazed's knowledge gave him comfort. He accepted the religions he knew, believed in their value, but that didn't give him what he needed. They didn't assure him that Tyndwyl's spirit still lived. Instead, they made him question. If so many people believe so many different things, how could any one of them or anything at all really be true? And then skipping just a little bit to the very last sentence, my life, he thought, has been a sham. And it felt like to me in that moment that here's Sazed, says he believes in all these religions, talks about how faith is important, sees the Church of the Survivor Ska live their faith, face down an army of Koloss, and then have his faith kind of broken by the death of Tyndwyl. I kind of wrote in my notes, did Tyndwyl just lose his faith? All of it.
Sazed.
Yeah, thank you. Sazed. Did Sazed just lose his faith in all his religions, all in this moment?
Yeah. One just as a side note, um, when asked, Brandon Sanderson says that Sazed is one of the characters he's most proud of for getting right the from book 1 to book 3. So just it wanted to point that out as you watch him deal with Tyndwyl moving forward.
He also made an interesting comment at Dragonsteel last year that we were at in one of the Q&As about it was something along the lines of like of all the characters, Sazed thinks the most like me or something like that, or I
Mm.
think the most like Sazed was something that he said, which honestly I try not to read into that too much because that makes me tempted to like replace some of Sazed's thoughts and like say, oh, that must be what Brandon believes. Like obviously that's probably like, wholly incorrect thing to do. But it does make me really wonder about some of the ways that Sazed is processing this, and wondering what Brandon maybe hold on from his own life or his own thoughts for some of this. Perhaps it makes me really curious.
Yeah.
I will add also, just for the value of sharing, honestly. So Sazed is easily one of my favorite characters. But this is a part I struggle with a little bit. It just feels way too like diplomatic, or like almost a politician's answers of, yes, I believe in all of them. Yes, I believe in all of them, but also I don't really stick to any myself,
Right.
And that's a bit, I mean, it is, I have to take that with a grain of salt because, you know, in real life, there's not someone who has a metal mind that lets them know these like hundreds to thousands of religions and why they're important, and the people groups that have, this is a fantasy world. I probably shouldn't get too realistic with it, but just naturally that, like, yeah, I all of the absolutely believe in all of them, but also like sort of at the same time none of them,
Mhm.
is tough. But I do love Sazed, so
I'm really excited to see where Sazed's character goes, like, going forward. I don't know if it's gonna be end of this book or into the next one. Like I said, I think Sazed feels like he's hit a spiritual low. I really want to know, where does he go from here? What happens next on Sazed's journey? And I'm going to be very upset if Sazed does not survive the rest of this book, and I don't get that rest of that story. I'll be mad about that because he is probably the character right now I'm the most interested in.
Yeah. Me as well. I really do enjoy Sazed. Anything else for Vin or Sazed before we move on to somebody else?
Maybe just stating it outright. We kind of talked around it a bunch. I'm not sure that we said it specifically. The scene where Sazed bulks out his muscles with the feruchemy, defends the gate. The moment where he's like literally shouldering the gate closed, shoving the dead Koloss out of the way, pushing the gate closed, holding it himself against the onslaught of Koloss. Epic, epic, epic moment. Probably easily top 5 of Mistborn so far. Easily,
Yeah.
maybe top 2.
What's top one?
I I hesitate to call this the most epic because like, Kelsier showdown with the Inquisitor and the Lord Ruler and all that was pretty epic too. Vin's own showdown with the Lord Ruler, also pretty epic. Yeah.
there's some good moments for sure. I do have to say I love it, and I love how starts because Sazed is like, he's basically talking about like he's a scholar. He's not an athlete, he's not a warrior. But he gets massive, and he's, it's funny to see him like use. I especially feel like this scene, if there were like an on-screen adaptation, that this would be really amusing because you would be so used to visually seeing Sazed as like a physically weak character,
Mm-hmm.
So like the Hulk,
There's something so
just with a brain.
so staple and classic about a fantasy story holding a gate against an oncoming force. Like there there are some really good scenes in fantasy, and holding a gate against an oncoming force of evil is gotta be up there for some of the best.
I was definitely getting some Helm's Deep vibes in some of these sections.
I was feeling the same thing. It felt, I was picturing Helm's Deep maybe a little too much. I don't know. I don't know how much I should picture that, but I mean, it feels pretty accurate. Like holding these gates, retreat, felt very Helm's Deep.
I disagree. It's certainly more Minas Tirith than Helm's Deep. The second army is on, well, I guess that's Helm's Deep too. But
Uh,
the
I guess it's the. Sorry, go ahead and finish what you're saying.
Vin is on her way to help, and you just need to hold out for. I mean, that's both Helm's Deep and Minas Tirith. So I was just the reason why I think it's Minas Tirith
Uh-huh.
is because Minas Tirith is a circular defense, and that's exactly what Luthadel is you can see across to like another gate, and you can
That nature of like the multi gates is definitely Minas Tirith, but the like I don't know. It has I don't actually know if it's day. It's nighttime during this, isn't it? In my head, it's nighttime. Maybe that's because I've pictured Helm's Deep, but I'm picturing a more dark, gloomy. I mean, Minas Tirith was fairly gloomy, but it's still like the White City. It's anyways. That's I guess that's enough Lord of the Rings for right now. But yeah, all in all, I definitely picture Helm's Deep.
I'm fairly certain the Koloss attack at dawn. Um,
Okay.
and by the time Vin shows up, it's like evening because she's got the red sun like setting behind her as she shows up. All right, who else? Rest in peace, Doxson and Clubs. Um, out of Tyndall, Doxson, and Clubs, who are we going to miss the most?
Personally, for me, it is Clubs. I think
Okay.
mostly because of his relation to Spook. He's Spook's uncle. Is that right? Um,
Yes.
and so I don't know. Having, I guess, that family like connection on there makes me more sympathetic, as well as like he's just kind of like the wiser, I guess, like the senior member. You know. So, but yeah, that's my personal answer. It's Clubs.
I I gotta disagree. I always had a bit of a soft spot for Dachshund. I but Clubs is cool, nothing against him, but Dachshund was always kind of the odd man out because he's the only one who doesn't have he's not a misting, right?
Right.
So
Hmm.
he's there. He's part of the crew purely off of his own like, knowledge and wits and skill, not just the because he's a superhero sort of thing. So
Hmm.
he also often like kind of felt like the glue holding the, the team together. So I'll definitely miss Doxson. Tyndall, I think, is the most heart wrenching of the three by far.
For sure. Do-
That was definitely
Doxson,
the most emotional scene was with Tyndall.
right.
Yeah.
However, Tyndall is not my favorite character. So
The the
I
most like dramatic scene I think was actually Clubs because up until this point nobody died, and then
yeah.
Clubs loses an arm, and you're like, oh, we're actually in trouble. Okay. I I mean, yes, we're fighting Koloss for the
Yeah.
last like 30 pages, but nobody's died yet. And then when Clubs loses an arm, that's certainly the most dramatic.
Club, Clubs is also like picture framed by Breeze having a mental breakdown.
Right.
Like that you're seeing him go down through the eyes of Breeze, who is like going insane
Hmm.
because he can't handle it. That made it emotional for sure. I I did want to say though, these deaths, while I didn't feel super emotionally connected to these characters, it seemed like it came with an extra level of gloom just
Mm,
because of the setting of Scadrial and Luthadel and
yeah.
all of this. It's it's a darker world. There's just a another level of despair kind of surrounding all of this. That's like maybe on another world, in another story, a character dies and you're like, "Oh, man, they died defending this beautiful place. They saved all these people. Like, what a beautiful picture. Like, there's a beautiful side of the sacrifice, not just a sad one." Here on Scadrial, where it's just all ash and darkness and really just not a place you wanna be, and, like, the Scar, are they even in a better place after all of this? Yeah, they're not dead, they're not getting mutilated by Koloss, but are their lives great? No. And so it's like, what did these guys die for?
Right.
Not a lot. Like, there's just a I don't know, it hits different.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And that's what Sazed is asking himself is why are we here after he sees Tyndall's dead body? And I've always thought that whenever there's an adaptation of Mistborn, it's going to be really hard to get the tone right because it really easily could just be a depressive 2-hour like slog for like all three movies, just simply because of the color palette. I mean, Roshar just looks prettier than Scadrial does.
Yeah.
And if you made it happy-go-lucky and cheery, that wouldn't be accurate to the book either.
Right.
So I agree with you. I think that balance is gonna be tricky, exactly like you said. It's gotta be true to the palette and tone of this world, but not so dark that you just walk out of the movie theater in depression.
Right. I also think it's interesting that this is a lot of people's first interaction with Sanderson. Is this series, and it's really not like the rest of what he does with his library. We've said it before on these episodes that he's influenced a lot more by Grimdark than he would have wanted at a later time. So it's just interesting to me that a lot of people start with Mistborn and get a very different taste of the Cosmere than most. What else, gentlemen?
Should we talk about Straff for a little bit?
Sure. We finally figured out why there's poison in his tea like 6 times a week.
That is true. I'm
Seriously.
curious to know what y'all think on that. So just to make sure I have it straight, right? It's basically like a drug for him, right? Like he thought it was I've been poisoned, but it's like the opposite. Is that right? Like he's been made reliant on it or something on that like Am I right, or is this completely off?
You're right.
That's like what it is, isn't it?
He's going through withdrawals on a drug that Amaranta has addicted him to. And so
Yeah.
he thinks he's been poisoned. And then Amaranta and Zane had conspired together and for Zane to take the fall for these poisons because Straff can't react against Zane because he needs Zane. So Amaranta says, "Hey, can you tell him you poisoned him while I get him addicted to this drug over however long, 6 months or whatever."
Kind of crazy. I had totally forgotten about this part, and also like that's kind of insane of Amaranta. Like that's like some next level conniving, you know?
And yet it also felt almost appropriate for Straff of like you create this nasty world where everyone's vying for your attention in all the most unhealthy ways, as we've talked about. And what do you get? Someone who wants your attention so bad that they get you addicted to a drug that they can then control your life with, and then eventually you die.
True. The
Yeah,
Although
that'll do it.
Vin gets Vin gets the satisfying final punch.
I mean, it's more than a punch, but we'll get there in a second. Um, I did not remember this twist. I genuinely thought, like you did, Elliot, that Straff was getting poisoned because Zane was bored and Zane had nothing more to do and Zane is
Right.
crazy. But over the last
Yeah.
couple episodes, it's been revealed to us with a dark, cryptic voice that Zane was not crazy, and then Straff was not getting poisoned by Zane.
Well,
so.
Zane's still a bit crazy, but he wasn't poisoning his father, I guess. So that helps.
And he was also hearing a voice that was legitimately there as opposed to something that was in his head.
Yes, that is true. He was a bit more of a victim than I guess we originally were led to believe.
I did try and think about this. Like, does this change how I view Zane at all? Does the fact that he wasn't poisoning his father change how I should be thinking about him? Feel like the answer is no, but maybe slightly.
How do you feel about Zane? Did you
I
drop on
think
that?
my computer's struggling.
I was gonna
Keeps
say it
lagging and
sounded
falling
normal
behind.
to me. It seems normal to me, but
He like we've talked about Zane. We've analyzed him in the past. We talked about his relationship. I kind of came to the point where it's like, yeah, Zane is crazy, being influenced by some kind of voice in the head, and also just kind of downright pretty nasty and has a terrible relationship with his father. Does the fact that he knew about the poisoning but wasn't actively doing anything, necessarily, does that change my view on him? I don't think so. Is he slightly less terrible? Yes. Yes, he is.
Sounds good. Yeah, so Straff gets split in half. His horse goes with him. There, I did not remember this, but that's certainly something I've noticed on this read. There's a lot of dead horses in this story. Vin kills a lot of horses. Sanderson did not care about our mounted friends.
Apparently not.
Which is funny because in Stormlight there's a whole like emotional scene over a dead horse in a certain book.
Yeah, Stormlight's a bit less savage, I think. This one, it's like he died, horse and all. Like he like
Vin
they
Vin force pushed with a angle of equine screams is how the first first part of the book starts.
Equine screams. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean it's pretty brutal. So
I this scene where Vin takes down Straff felt very anime to me,
Yeah.
with her picking up a Koloss sword. We got our big, impossibly huge sword.
comically large sword. Yeah,
We've got her shooting through the air for hundreds or thousands of feet, flying out of the sky, probably going yeah as she's doing it, and takes him out with the huge sword. It felt like a scene. I could
and
see
and
the pains going by of the anime scene.
and the whole like basically being split right down the middle. I mean that's like pretty.
And
That's pretty apt, I
Yeah.
guess.
And up until this point, she's killed everybody with her 2 daggers. But no, we had to pull out a sword that's twice the size that she is
Yep.
to split Straff down the center. Good death. I'm gonna as far as villain deaths go, is that a good death or no?
I mean, Straff, I feel like was our most diabolically evil person thus far, right now in our story. So, yeah. I mean, it was a bit gruesome. However, I mean, like I said, he is probably the most evil person we've got right now. So,
Yep. I agree.
Is that our 5th dead character of the episode?
Chastis. Yeah.
Jastes?
oh, I forgot about Jasties. I was gonna say, I thought it was just. You're right.
What else do we have? Oh, the well. We didn't talk about the well. One of the big reasons why Vin turns back and runs for Luthadel is she realizes that the well is actually getting quieter as they are traveling north. And she turns around to Ellen and says, the well is not in the north. The well is in Luthadel or near Luthadel. Did you see this one coming, Eliot? I remember this one, unfortunately.
That's a hard question to answer for some reason, because did I specifically predict that? No. Would not have, told you I thought that was the case. But this is one of those where I feel like it's been kind of slowly fed to us, to the point where, like, when you get the reveal, it's not shocking at all. It seems like I've been questioning the whole is the well in Terrace for a while now. Was I ready to say, oh well, obviously it's in Luthadel? No, but then we also had the scene where Vin kind of randomly went into Creedic Shaw, and
Yep.
that was the loudest she'd ever heard the pounding.
Yep.
And I was very ready for that to be some kind of epic reveal moment, and then it wasn't. She just went into Creedic Shaw. Oh my gosh, there's so much power here, and I'm leaving. Bye. And so kind of all those together. Did I put the pieces together? No. Am I surprised? Also, no. I guess.
So I think this is a little bit funny. So she does come back because she like doesn't hear the thumping, right? Like this
Mhm.
whole thumping. And I mean, have we talked about that before? Like why does she have this thumping thing?
So
Like why does she think why is like I feel like that's like the general assumption is like, oh, this thumping. It's like I mean, if it was a consistent thing, like that kind of makes sense, but it's like, oh, I hear or feel this thumping. It's the well of ascension. It's calling to me, you know?
I
Like maybe you just need to get your heart rate checked, you know. I don't know. I mean,
I write it off as I mean, the biggest question I have is with it is why is she the only one hearing it? Why has Zane never mentioned it? Why is there no other copper? Bronze? Who can listen? Bronze? Why is there no other bronze burners in the city mentioning this? What's special about Vin? And the only real solution I came to is same reason why she can control Tensoon, same reason why she can control the Kolas, is simply because she's figured out more about her powers than anyone else has. Everybody else has this base level knowledge of bronze and doesn't assume that anything more can be done with it. Zane about might have been about to get there because of his um shared discovery of duralumin. So right before he died, he burns duralumin for the first time. And I think duralumin is what really unlocks most of this for Vin and why she's the only one that can hear the well or the thumping or whatever. Um, because duralumin really just levels you up to level 2 on everything. So
oh, and something else with this, which I didn't realize at all until my reread of there's like this mention. I don't remember when it was in a previous episode we had. This mention of like, oh, she's Vin is strong, like the Alamancers of old,
right.
you know. And
That
there was this like nod that Alamancy used to be way more maybe intense, way stronger. And I feel like you could say it's that somehow Ven has some connection that she's an Alamancer of old, I guess, or figured something else out about Alamancy that's been like forgotten or something.
right. And you also can't write everything off to duralumin because in book 1 she's piercing copper clouds before she knows about duralumin. So there is something weird happening with Vin. And a lot of people are starting to notice.
It seems like we've been pointed to the fact that back to the thumping, the the hero of ages from the journal heard the thumping as well, and like that seems to be hinted at as a key thing is that no one else hears this, but the hero of ages does,
Right.
and so that's a great question. Is Vin just have a higher knowledge or mastery of Allomancy, and that's what's giving her these abilities? Is it because she's the hero of ages, and that's why she has these abilities? Are the two of those the same? I guess I'm kind of forcing my previous theory into this discussion, but I'm going to do it anyway. Maybe that's what being the hero of ages is. Again, maybe it's not a you're the chosen one. It's you've reached a certain level of mastery, which allows you to be the hero of ages. Not
Right.
necessarily the you're born with these skills. It's no, Vin and the old hero of ages, Alendi, I'm not convinced that's his name anymore. Whoever he was, then did they just have this like higher skill level, which allows them to be a candidate for the hero of ages? Like, is that the situation? Don't know.
Right. But then you also have to bring up the question of were Mistborn around before the Lord Ruler, because there's
True.
evidence to the contrary that the Mistborn showed up when the Mists did, which is when the Lord Ruler showed
Right.
up. So yeah, anyway.
Right. So if in that scenario, I guess I'd be claiming that the Alendi guy had so much knowledge that there weren't even Alamanchers around, but he'd already gotten to some kind of a high level of knowledge or mastery or ability with those kinds of powers that he's keying into that stuff before Allomancy is even a thing, which might be a stretch. Yeah.
What else?
That's about all I had. We got a lot of epic action moments in these
I have
segments, but I
a
think we covered all the
Yeah, I have a little kind of question of like, what do you think is gonna be like next for Ellen's character? I'm saying this all before, like this is a lot of like kind of book wrap up questions, but I kind of want to, we're about to go into part 6, which is a new thing of,
Unheard
not
of
having just
thing.
5 parts. Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, like at Vin, I feel like we have a pretty clear like of like her kind of respecting herself, like like finding her own value and stuff like that. That kind of storyline. With Elend, I feel like in my mind it's less clear, and so I'm curious to know what y'all think. Like, what's kind of in store for his character? He's especially with with Doxson being gone, he's kind of like our only like just about our only major non uh elements or non-misting or Mistborn character.
I wouldn't be too surprised if this book is Ellen's development book. We saw him go through kingship classes with Tyndwyl. We saw him go from a very earnest and righteous, but not really knowledgeable or confident character, all the way to so confident and so believing in himself that he's ready to execute someone for their crimes on the spot. I wonder if I doubt we'll see no development in Elend for the rest of the story. That would shock me, just because Sanderson is always developing his characters. He's so good at that. But are we going to see that level of development again from him? My guess at this point would be no. That this is Ellen's book, and the next book is going to be something else, and that we're going to maybe see Ellen emerge as a not just righteous leader, but now an effective one. Maybe he really can rally the people behind him and truly lead, kind of going forward. I mean, we just ended this part with Vin having very forcefully and militarily secured allegiances for Ellen from everybody. She
Right.
kind of forced everybody into swearing allegiance to Ellen, and Ellen apparently has a newfound confidence that that could be a winning combo for him. So I'm almost dodging your question. I'm almost wanting to say like, what's next for Ellen? I it's going too far to say it doesn't matter, but I think he's going to be maybe a little bit in the shadows. I'm gonna laugh when I'm so completely wrong, and the third book is like all Ellen. But my
No,
prediction at this point is that Ellen may become a little bit more of a supporting character going forward.
Ellen's the hero of
that's
ages.
Could be.
yeah. There we go. I was gonna say it is very fair, especially right now where we are, to just like it's almost an unfair question because there's not anything super like I guess major with him. It's not like it's not clear on what's in store for Ellen's character. So
He did just get his throne back, but it's I I don't remember if this does happen or not. I just hope we get out of Luthadel in the third book. I want I want Ellen's kingdom to mean something. I want to go somewhere and do something with not Luthadel. But anyway.
what?
Okay.
I think you're being selfish.
Eliot, prediction before we go to Stormlight stuff. What happens before the end of the book and what doesn't happen before the end of the book? We've got 50, 60 pages left. I feel like the book could have ended right there, and every other Sanderson book would have. What is part 6?
The book felt like it could have ended at the end of part 4. It felt like it could have ended at the end of part 5 right
Well,
there.
but
No clue.
had it ended on either one, it would not be named the Well of Ascension, surely. So,
Ex-
what's in part 6?
Exactly. It obviously has to be the Well of Ascension.
Sure.
It's gotta be. You can't name the book Well of Ascension if we spend the entire time talking about the Hero of Ages and never go to the Well of Ascension. So surely, surely the end of this book is Vin discovering the Well of Ascension in Luthadel, apparently, probably in Kredic Shaw. He apparently the Lord Ruler built Kredic Shaw like over and around the Well of Ascension itself, which sounds very much like a move like that he would do, right?
Yeah.
Ooh, discovered this super important power. Build a fortress around this so nobody else gets the super important power. So Vin discovers that. She Vin's got a little bit of a darker side to her. I don't have a I don't have full faith that she's gonna like take on the power, but then deny its use, like do
Give,
what the Hero of Ages is supposed to do.
give it up. Yeah.
Yeah, I I could see a story where Vin gets a little bit seduced by the power and maybe wields it in a way that's not so great. Perhaps we're going that route. I don't know that we're going to go that far. I bet that's the next book. I think we're just going to find the Well of Ascension. Vin is imbued with supernatural ascension power. Closing scene.
Okay. Something that's on my mind that I don't remember what happens. We've seen an Inquisitor in Kredic Shaw, apparently. So if we're headed to Kredic Shaw for part 6, what happens with that, Elliot?
I I bet there's more than one Inquisitor. I bet to get to the Well of Ascension, Vin's gonna have to go through one or two or six Inquisitors. They've been very suspiciously absent from this entire book. We ended book one. Somebody even mentioned in like the closing scenes of book one, oh, but and there's a bunch of Inquisitors out there. We're gonna have to deal with all of those. We have not had to deal with a single one of those
Well,
so far.
and at the end of book 1, I think it's Sazed says there's a bunch of Inquisitors out there, and Marsh says, "Nah, don't worry, I got him." What about Marsh, Elliot? Marsh was in the first like 4 chapters of this book and is gone.
I'm not sure we're gonna see Marsh again in this book. I'm wondering if that was another Sanderson dangle the carrot and then yank it away thing, where it's, ooh, here's Marsh. He's saying a lot of cryptic, really suspicious and weird things, and he's gone. And he'll show up in like part 2 of the next book, and that'll be a big deal and
Okay. Okay.
stuff. I think Vin's gonna have to fight a couple Inquisitors. It's Vin, so she'll come up with a clever way to Allomancer her way through it. And then she gets the Well of Ascension, assumes the power, book ends.
Okay. With that, let's pull a Stormlight spoiler. So anyone who has not read the Stormlight Archive, you're about to get a big spoiler for the end of Words of Radiance,
Huge.
specifically.
Please leave if you have not read the Stormlight Archive. Please.
Yeah. So way back to the beginning of this episode, Elliot, go ahead.
Okay. What I want to talk about.
Well, wait, hold
Ellen.
on, pause. We can tease this a little bit further. Something that we didn't get to last week, which ties into what we were just talking about. Going into Kredic Shaw, Vin walks in, it's like, wow, the power is really powerful here, and then leaves. And at the time, we acknowledged that's a weird scene. And I read that scene to tease a Stormlight spoiler that we didn't get to last week. The flute. We need to talk about the flute.
That's a good one. I forgot about the flute entirely.
Here's what I want to talk about the flute. Somebody in our Discord, I don't remember who it was, acknowledged to me that on this podcast, we've talked about the difference between world singers and world bringers. Okay, the Lord Ruler was no, No. Terrace. We need to define both. World singers are what Sigzil and Void are? Yes?
Yes.
So they go around telling stories to people, both true and false. Like, but both, I shouldn't say true and false, both myth, myth and like
History.
historical, right? To other people to pass on like culture and you know Hoyt has his therapy sessions with it, like telling these stories. Sigzil tells some stories about the moons of Roshar, blah 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 blah. Those are world singers. World bringers in this book are defined as terracemen who pass on knowledge to other people after the Lord Ruler is dead. Right? That's
I think specifically wasn't mentioned as like a precursor organization to the Keepers.
right.
It's like I got the impression they're not still around. That it was there used to be Worldbringers. The modern day version of that is Keepers.
Right. And one of the key things we got about world singers, Sigzil and Hoyd, in the Way of Kings, Hoyd gives Kaladin a flute, specifically a flute, and calls it a trailman's flute, quote unquote, a trailman's flute. I wonder that this is a genuine question. I wonder if world singers and world bringers are the same, and it's just a translation thing. Like, and they stemmed from the same people. So I'm wondering if the Lord Ruler at one point knew Hoyd or knew the people group that Hoyd comes from. Tracking with me?
Plausible.
Yeah, I am.
I I didn't put too much significance myself on the flute. I'm not quite sure why. I thought of Hoyd specifically and how we haven't seen him in this book.
Yeah.
I'm gonna laugh when we actually have and I missed it, but I have not seen Hoyd so far in this book, and I've been led to believe that Hoyd is in every book. So we'll I'm still on the hunt for that. I thought of him when we saw that flute briefly in Creedic Shaw, but I don't know. Maybe a little bit of a stretch.
Specifically, I think it's a stretch because of the publication date. And if we're meta talking this,
Yeah.
Sanderson's not putting as much inner Cosmere stuff in these early books as in the later books. So,
Yeah.
um, it's just really strange to put in a flute when there's been no reference to a flute and then over referencing a flute in the Way of Kings and onward.
Well, I wonder if it's Sanderson just attaching thematic significance to that instrument specifically of people that tell stories and further the knowledge of history and myth are associated with flutes.
Yeah,
Maybe
they're
that's
all
just
flute
a
players.
yeah, or just there's kind
Everyone
of a
knows that.
symbolicness to the flute instrument that it goes with mythology in
Right.
Brandon's world.
Okay.
It's the equivalent to the lute for the bard in
Sure,
on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
sure.
All right, now we're talking about Dead Sadius.
Ed Sadius. At that scene, that shocking scene in Words of Radiance, end of Words of Radiance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Where Adolin shockingly takes it upon himself to execute Sadius, felt really reminiscent. I guess it's the other way around. This scene we just saw with Elend executing Jastes immediately brought me back to that scene where Adolin kills Sadius. It felt really similar. You've got a villain who you're just itching to get rid of. There's every reason in the world why this person needs to no longer be living. And I know we analyzed the Adolin Sadius scene ad nauseum back in that time, and I know I've taken a fairly strong stance, which I think is not a rather popular one in the
Well,
in the Cosmere fandom.
and I have the same. So I have the same stance on the Sadius death. I feel it's unjust for Adolin to take the knife into his own hands at that time, but I don't feel that way about this one, and I don't know why. Why does this? I'm trying to figure it out for myself. Why does this execution feel more just than brawling Sadius in the back alleys of Urithiru and killing him? They've done the same thing, and Jastes is arguably more innocent. That Sadius is fully aware of everything he's doing. Jastes is just incompetent and a loser, a coward. But Sadius is intentional.
And
That
that was
is fair.
exactly my question
I
to you guys. Is I feel a lot the same way of what you just described, Trevor. I feel like I'm quicker to accept what Ellen just did, and I'm with you. I'm not exactly sure why. I think it may honestly, for me, come down to the fact that, and this is like nitpicking the details. Ellen and Jastes are standing man to man, face to face. Is Jastes armed? I'm not sure. I don't recall. In my mind, he is, but I'd have to go back and look to see if that's true. This felt a little bit more like I'm face to face with my enemy and I take him out. Whereas Adolin's to me very much feels like a deception based takedown of I'm going to trick you into the back alley and then knife you when you aren't ready. Maybe that's the difference.
So I will say with this whole thing also, so with Jastes, it feels like we can have some sympathy for Jastes.
A little bit.
Yeah, we can have a little bit. He's obviously an idiot and was very extremely wrong, but Straff was way worse. I think everyone would agree that
Sure.
Straff is far worse of a character. And so like yeah, I feel like I don't know. Maybe this is reading into it too much, but I'm like, since I'm allowed a little bit of sympathy for Jastes, I feel like that makes it like where I get to have zero sympathy for Straff, if that makes sense. Maybe I.
You mean Sadius?
So are you?
Oh, well. Oh yes. Well, okay.
So,
I guess I was
so are
bringing Straff into this more than needed. Because I
but Paul?
mean, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you for clarification there. You're saying you have a small amount of sympathy for Jastes. So does that mean that action by Ellen is less excusable in your mind? You don't want Ellen to execute Jastes because you've got a tiny bit of sympathy there?
Essentially, yes. Like, well, okay. To answer the question of do I think Ellen should have killed Jastes in the story, I think yes. But also, like with a lot of that stuff in fantasy, I'm fairly ruthless. Like, I'm not really gonna defend Sadius either or any of these characters usually. Like, but compared between the different characters, but compared between Sadius or Straff or in any situation, I guess, sort of like that. Um, yeah, it's really like a like I'm on the side of Ellen here. I'm on the side of um, Adolin and Stormlight. But yeah, but I guess between the two, I think I have I would definitely say I had more sympathy for Jastes than because with Jastes it feels more like he has made a humongous mistake and couldn't see it, and Sadius is very he knows exactly what he's doing, you know. So you know.
Right. So for me, it's not that I have sympathy for Sadius. I have zero sympathy for Sadius. It's it's the effect that it has on Elend or Adolin. I feel like Adolin killing Sadeas is a character flaw of Adolin's, and I don't know how I feel about Elend. I'll say that. And there is something that I'll point out that I'm not sure if this is the reason why I feel differently about these two. The guards are there for Jasty's execution. I don't know if that makes a big difference to me. But just thinking about it, that is a difference that I've thought of. And the guards back up Ellen's decision. I don't know. I'm kind of just articulating thoughts without a conclusion because I still don't know.
There's something about how Adolin goes about it with Sadeas that just feels underhanded to me. And I
Right.
can't get past that. It just feels whereas it seems like Elend has the moral high ground. I feel like Adolin surrenders some of his moral high ground in the way that he goes about it, and that's a difference for me. At the end of the day, is it a hero taking out a villain? Yes. Yes, it is. Also, to revisit my soapbox earlier, in both stories, it is highly problematic politically and socially,
Right.
in my opinion. Whether it's right or wrong morally, it is very wrong legally to
Right.
do what they do.
Well,
And
and halfway through Oathbringer, Adolin confesses to Dalinar, and Dalinar gives him a verbal, smack across the back of the head. Like Dalinar's not okay with the actions that Adolin took. I don't think anyone in this story is going to take Dalinar's stance for Jasty's death.
I will say there is one, if we're going to talk about politics and legalities, there is one legal scenario in which I think Elend is perfectly qualified to do this, and that's the one where he's king.
All
If
right,
Elend
sure.
is an all-powerful king, where he is the law, can he decide that someone is guilty and then execute them himself on the spot? Yeah, he probably can. Now, is Elend king with that authority in this moment?
not
Probably not.
not yet. I mean, he is by the end of the
Right,
part, but right.
right. So, but maybe there's a slight little ledge to stand on there of perhaps Elend is worthy of wielding that kind of authority. Is Adolin? Absolutely not.
I mean, Adolin's a high prince. He's and by the end
And
of
in a world where you let your high princes go murdering anyone they want and there are no
other
ramifications for
high
that,
princes,
that's a
yeah.
big problem.
I was
Big
gonna say
problem.
in general, I know Luthadel like this world schedule has its own like legal system, but even though there is one, it is way worse, way less fleshed out, I think, and way probably more brutal than there is on Roshar. Like Roshar, I feel like is fairly civil. Like you kill someone even if it was the right thing, like it's okay. I don't know. I feel like there's way more you could get away with on Scadrial.
Yeah, and to that point, how many times before the end of Words of Radiance has the phrase Alethi Codes of Honor been on page? And how many times has the Scadrial Code of Honor been on page before Elend decapitates his friend? So it really I think that might be a big key point of this is the entire first two books, Dalinar is pushing the Alethi to be more honorable, follow the codes, blah blah blah. He conveniently has forgotten who he used to be, but he's pushing for Alethi Codes of Honor, and at the end of Words of Radiance, it feels like Adolin is willfully falling short of what his father is pushing his whole family to be. And Elend is just, being judge, jury, executioner, as we've been saying.
To drag your comparison out a little bit further, there is a bit of similarity there in that Elend wrote all these laws to try and protect the people, and then very at his own downfall adhered to those laws. Like
Right.
they don't talk about code of honor at all and all that, but in a small way it kind of is with Elend. He's trying to introduce a more honorable system of government where there's a set of laws to protect everyone and no one is an excuse to those laws. And then for Ellen to then do this act is slightly strange in all of that. Again, unless he is the king with all the authority in which he can do that, it's complicated.
Which he's deliberately trying not to be for the whole book.
Yeah. Anyway, fantastically complicated scenarios and scenes where you can spend 30 minutes dissecting the legality and morality of deciding to kill the villain.
I would love
Absolutely.
to make like a meme video, parody video of people being okay with Ellen's decision, and then Adolin being like all hot-headed and bothered about how people aren't okay with Adolin's decision. Like, why can he do this and I can't? Yeah, they did the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. Anything else, gentlemen?
All I got. Fascinated to find out what's in the next 50 pages of this book.
The last 50 pages of the... Let's finish the book next week, and then the week after we will talk about the whole thing. And then I believe we're going to jump straight into the Hero of Ages. I believe so. Let's keep reading and finish the book next week. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot.
Always another secret.
Very well.
He said the line.
That hasn't been in this book at all yet.